Thomas' 50th birthday roast. You're in some big damn trouble. If you would come up here and have a seat, you would be miserable for about 3 hours. As I call your name with the respected or disrespected roasters come forward, the Honorable Linwood Smith, the Dishonorable Joe Berry, the Honorable Judge Daniel B. Banks, the Honorable Bill Page, Harvey's next and he's not here. When you figure he's probably at a high school prom trolling for a date. Watson, the Dishonorable Roy Wesley Miller, the Dishonorable Charles Key. This is why you don't be miserable for 3 hours. At this time, what I'd like to do, since it's hard to concentrate on eating and cooking, I'd like for us to go ahead and start with our food with an idea that we'll eat it as fast as possible so we can all concentrate on making Dean miserable the rest of the week. Rules of the roast, so that everybody will know exactly where we stand. There is a principle of law which most of us know, and there's some ladies here that may not know it. It's the principle of assumption of the risk. And what you have done by walking in the door like a football player who goes into a football game, he assumes the risk of injury at the hands of another player. And while he could be injured in a car wreck for the same injuries and claim damages for them, he couldn't in a football game. It's a defense. You have, by walking through these double doors, assumed the risk of injured sensibilities. And I hope no one will complain because it could get pretty rough. Curiously enough, there is a council against child abuse right on the other side of the petition. And there's some Black Baptist ministers on the other side of that. But we're just going to have to do the best we can. A couple other rules are principle of contributory negligence or contributing to the delinquency of a known incompetence. There's some people in this room who are guilty of that, and their names may be mentioned in certain context, and they have no cause of action by virtue of it. The third principle is the statute of limitations. Generally, in most cases or situations, time itself will prevent you from taking an action or saying something against someone. The statute of limitations in regard to Dea Thomas has been suspended. Any story from the beginning of time to today is admissible. The fourth principle is that of immunity. I have already said something cute about my law partner. And I may have a drink or two and say something cute God forbid, about one of these circuit court judges. We know these men are eminently fair and would never hold a grudge. I am seeking immunity, and I think they would seek immunity from anything they said. Robert Lang in Channel 48, back there with your camera. I think that about covers it. Without any further ado, the process we go through is, your program, of course, is not correct because everybody wants to be in a different place. But, and we will, however, start with the Honorable Linwood Smith. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Tommy. Members of the head table, ladies and gentlemen, honorees. It's both a surprise and a pleasure to be asked to participate in this occasion. Surprised because, frankly, I didn't expect you to live this long. And it's a pleasure because our purpose here tonight is to commemorate the golden 50th year of a true, living, legal legend. That rebel with a cause, that Marlon Brando of the bar, the lawyer Dea Thomas. Now, it's been said that the mark of greatness in any man is the extent to which he's emulated by his peers. Now, if that be a true observation, then we should look back upon the first 50 years of his life with great satisfaction. He has left his mark upon many a member of this bar, especially Roy Wesley Miller. It was he who revealed to Roy a cosmic truth, namely that rhetoric does not settle a dispute nearly as effectively as fist. It also was he who taught Charlie Hooker how to whisper in the sawmill, how to argue a case with that quiet, sincere dignity that he's become noted for. And it also was he who taught the virtues of humble, clean living to David Worley. But perhaps the greatest influence has been upon one who unfortunately is not with us tonight, but whose resemblance to Dee in his younger days is so striking that few can miss it. I speak, of course, of that person who copied Dee in every detail, from his unwavering respect of judicial authority to the refined elegance of his motorcycle. That barrister of the Blacktops, private attorney Randolph E. Neal. Unfortunately, like so many other great men, he has a flaw. Yes. Oh no. Yes. He is terrified of judges. And I discovered that flaw just after becoming a circuit judge. Being new to the position, I was anxious to establish my authority. Dee appeared at a crowded standing room only docket call. His client was accused of contempt for failing to pay child support. After looking over the file, I sternly told Dee, in the most forceful tones that I could muster, that if the plaintiff proved her allegations, I would jail his client without hesitation. Now, I was trying to force Dee to settle, and I was also trying to communicate a message to the other lawyers in the courtroom. But that hope disappeared when Dee replied in a booming voice, "Well, I'll talk to him, Judge, but I doubt it'll do any good. There's a lot tougher judges than you." chair. He asked if I had a problem, a back problem, like Judge Banks. I said no, that I had another occupational disorder, hemorrhoids. To which Dee responded, well, look at the bright side, Your Honor. If you didn't have that problem, you'd be a perfect asshole. After those experiences, I usually expected the unusual from Dee. Like the time in 1985 when Dee was in no hurry to try a civil case. He got several continuances. And after trying to secure yet another continuance in more conventional ways, the week before trial, Dee sends me this postcard from an alleged CLE conviction out west. And the postcard has a picture of a vast parched prairie, empty except for this pitiful little tent pitched beside a supply wagon and surrounded by a handful of sheep. Now the printed inscription on the back of the card explained that it depicted the plight of the sheep herder, whose modest means often forced him to live with his sheep far out in the lone prairie. And I quote from it, sheep herders and their bands of sheep are often out months at a time, and this is their home. Supplies are brought out to them, and they live with their sheep during the summer season. On the back, Dee had written this message, Dear Linda Wood, Ron, and Darlene, lost the car in Vegas. Now traveling with sheep herders as shown. We'll be home late. Love, Dee. Well, I want you to know that I wasn't taken in. If Pete Lanier couldn't attach Dee's sports car, I knew that no slick Las Vegas gambler could get it. So I wrote Dee the following letter. Care of General Delivery, Jackson Hole, Wyoming. Dear Dee, sorry to learn of your misfortune at the Las Vegas gaming tables. I am more alarmed at your living arrangements out there, however, and urge you to reconsider your decision to live with sheep. Bestiality and buggery still are felonies. Sincerely, Linwood. P.S. Your request for a continuance is denied. Well, Dee showed up for the docket call following week, and while I hesitate to say that he had a sheepish grin on his face, he did smile more than usual as he fondled his woolen sweater. Boasting that he would outlive me because he never wasted energy resisting temptation. Indeed, that may be the secret of your longevity. I'm duty-bound to warn you, however, that some discretion is in order. Otherwise, the following might be said of you. Mary had a little lamb, with morals so ripe for picking. Dea Thomas had that country urge that just kept right on ticking. A lamb, he exclaimed, but with a pause, he considered certain bestiality laws. Oh, bugger the statute, who will know, I'll have my fun and then I'll go. So he pulled the wool over his thighs and gently covered those big lamb eyes. This he did, that sly old ram, just before returning to Alabama. Now time did pass, and quiet he did keep about his lusty performance with Lolita the sheep. But he no longer remembers and laughs, ha ha, For now there are sheep who call him Pa.
Does everybody understand now why Judge Smith's behind on the caseload? Does immunity cover ordinary negligence?
Anything there is. Next time I ask for continuance, I expect to get it.
Not following your program. Next is Judge Danny Banks. First, I'd like to say that I'm glad to be here this evening. Never in my wildest dreams did I ever believe that I would attend Dea Thomas' 50th birthday party. As a matter of fact, a few years ago, it was an even money bet that Dea would make it to 40. When Tommy Sr. called and asked if I would speak tonight, I said, sure, what do you want to say? He said, say anything you want. I couldn't believe that. I've known Dea too long for him to say that to me, or to anybody else that we on Judge platform. There are laws against libel and slander. But then I got to thinking, truth is a defense. I don't think anybody has any real problem with that. But I thought about it more and I decided, well, I won't be harsh or ugly or gross about Dea. He's done enough of that to himself. Dea and I grew up in Madison County together, separately. Dea was from Monrovia. I came from a little higher class part of the county, a place called Low Mill, 5 or 6 blocks east of Boogertown. For those of you who don't know what I'm talking about, that's in West Huntsville. But I first met Dea when he was an assistant district attorney under Tom Younger. Something happened after that, I don't recall what, but anyway, Dea became district attorney in his own right after that. Getting a little nervous, Dea? I'm not going to go into that. I'll leave that ground for these other people to plow. Dea was always a how-to person during the time that I've known him. And as I understand, even before I knew him, he was a how-to person. He wanted to know how to do things. For example, I understand that when he was a youngster, he wanted to know how to play the drums. And he did, at a band. After that, he wanted to know how to ride a motorcycle. And he did. He wanted to know how to be a lawyer, how to be a DA, how to throw a party in the courthouse. He's been somewhat successful in some of these endeavors, but not so successful in others. But we all know that Dea is a very intelligent person, has a brilliant legal mind. He's a well-read person. And I'll share with you a story. One time I was at Dea's house out in Monrovia. We were in his den. Dea left the room, and while he was gone, I got up and walked around. I looked at his bookshelves and some of the books that were in his shelves. And I became aware of how well-read he was. For example, on the subject of law, and he is a brilliant legal mind, I noticed a book entitled How to Interview a Client, a female client, in the Madison County Jail. And on the subject of sports, I saw a book entitled How to Play Chicken with a Pickup Truck While Riding a Motorcycle.
the subject of medicine. How to recover from serious injuries received while riding a motorcycle. And when Dee came back, I talked to him about these books, and he said he was going to write another book entitled Why You Should Not Play Chicken with a Pickup Truck. And as we talked, I looked around some more, and I saw some other books by some local authors. Some of you may know these people. One was by William D. Page, entitled How Not to Be Moody. One was by Linwood Smith, How to Write Short Decrees. One was by S.A. Watson, How to Attack from the Bailiff. One was by Tom Younger, How to Chew Up Pencils. One by John D. Snodgrass, How to Control Your Temper While Turning Red all over. And he had one of my books in there. And since he's taken up golf, which will prove to be one of his worst afflictions, this will prove handy. How to arrange your schedule so that you'll have Thursday afternoons off. These are rather innovative lawyers, as we all know. When the representation of his criminals, clients, I've been on the bench a few years, and Dee has been before me several times. He was before me one time with a client who had been convicted of a felony offense. We were having a sentencing hearing. I had a pre-sentence investigation before me, and I asked if this was correct, and they both, he and his client, acknowledged that it was. We went through the usual sentencing evidence of whatever, and at the conclusion of that, I asked Dee and his client if there was anything that they wished to say before I pronounced sentence. Dee said that he would like to apply for probation on behalf of his client. I said, Dee, excuse me, Mr. Thomas, the pre-sentence report indicates that your client has 3 pages of prior felony convictions. He has been in every detention facility known to man. He's been in the D home, reform school, city court, county court, state prison, federal prison. He even went to prison in the Army. And you're asking me to put him on probation. Dee looked up at me very seriously and sort of sheepishly, but very seriously, and said, Judge, y'all tried jail on this man. It's just not working. I want to leave you with something that you can use in my court one time. I was reading a book on the legal profession and its ethics, and there was a chapter about lawyers for the defense, lawyers that defend clients. This little article was entitled Codd's Puzzle. Some of you may have heard it, but Mr. Codd was a barrister in Old England. A charming old gentleman who was rather innovative in his defense of criminal clients. His client was charged with stealing a duck. In his presentation to the jury and before the court, Codd said to the jury, I would like to present to you 7 reasons why my client should not be found guilty. First of all, he bought this duck and paid for it. Second, he found this stuff. Third, someone gave him. Fourth, this duck flew into his yard. Fifth, my client was asleep and someone put this duck in his pocket. Sixth, my uncle, or his uncle, left him this duck in his will. Seventh, there was no duck. The judge then said, is there any particular one of these defenses that you wish to insist upon? At that time, Todd replied, and this reminded me of Dee. He said, no, Your Honor, my client wants to make a clean breast of things. He wants to put all of these before the jury and would be much obliged if they would select one of these and free my client. Dee, that's my birthday present to you. You can use it one time. Great fox of our Bar Association, Mr. Joe Barry.
Thank you, Tommy. Friends and good friends.
Mr. Barry,
Yes.
could I ask you a question, please?
Well, yes. Step a little closer, please. What, yes.
If all you people think that Mr. Thomas is so wonderful and great, why couldn't he give my baby a name?
Well, young lady, I'll be happy to take your name and address and put you on the list. Get on out here, please. Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize. That young lady contacted me last week, and I told her I couldn't represent her. You've always depended on someone else to advise you on the law, and I think you should know that Section 2617(8) provides that a father's liability for education and support are limited to a 2-year period next preceding the commencement of the action, and that no action may be brought to determine parentage after the child reaches 19 years of age. I share that with you in light of this recent
It's going to be swept out for 18 years.
I feel that the statute of limitations should be of particular comfort to you, probably eliminate about 10% of your potential liability. My first impression of Dea Thomas was exactly 28 years ago. That time Dee was in school, or he was supposed to be in school. I was brand new in law practice, and I had a guy come to see me that was irate. He was upset. He had an exchange of correspondence with Dea Thomas, and he had the letters that he wanted my representation. And the letters read something like this. His letter to Dea Thomas. Dear Mr. Thomas, I'd like to meet you at 6 p.m. down by the big spring below the bank on the east side square. I want to discuss with you the adulterous affair you've been having with my wife. Yours truly, John Jones. He handed me Dee's reply. Dear Mr. Jones, I got your form letter of February 3rd. I'm sorry, I've got other commitments. I won't be able to attend the big meeting at your call. But I want to let you know that whatever you and the rest of the son of a bitch decide upon will be all right with me. My second impression of Dee came when he first started in the practice of law, and I I try to find, I guess, because I'm basically animal, I try to find the semblance of animal in other people. And these first impressed me as a rooster. He really looked like a rooster when he started. He was a little bantam rascal that jumped around, and it reminds me of the little, well, Dee reminds me of the little poem about the rooster that goes something like this. I love to hear the rooster crow. He's like so many men I know who rave and bluster, rap and shout, and beat their manly breast without the first damn thing to crow about. In fairness, so after this pretty little girl came through here, that little poor was a cute little kid.
What's she have in her arm?
I'm beginning to think that maybe you do have something to call about. Now I want to take you forward 57 years into the future. I want to share with you a news release. It involves our friend, Attorney Dea Thomas. Dateline, October 3, 2044. It says photograph from News Bureau files. And it reads, this paper is happy to report the anxiously awaited demise of David L. Thomas. Whose late model atomic-powered motorcycle failed to successfully negotiate Steger's curve in North Madison County. One of the ladies of the night who was riding with him was propelled into Earth orbit and will obviously become a matter of considerable scientific curiosity as her movements are tracked in the future. The other two road whores were riding Those two were not so fortunate. One drowned in the Briar Fork of the Flint River, and the other was found impaled on a fence post 4.5 miles north of the accident scene.
Is that a good legal description?
It's reported that Mr. Thomas had 13 cases of beer in one saddlebag and 8 gallons of moonshine in the other.
Not guilty.
It took 18 emergency medical personnel to remove him from his tight leather breeches. And the mortician had considerable difficulty in removing the grin from his face so that at last he would look solemn in death. Mr. Thomas served Madison County in a most undistinguished manner as district attorney for a brief period of time. He resigned that office after being pinned in 3 consecutive occasions in a catch-as-catch-can contest in the backyard of Claude Pipe's house in Mr. Thomas has written his own epitaph, and his dying wish was that this paper would share it with you, and we're happy to oblige. That epitaph reading, how do I know my life has been spent? My get up and go has got up and went. But that is not so bad when I recall with a grin all of the places my get up has been. See, you're a living proof that a hunchback man can straighten up, and I love you.
I'll have one more roaster, and then we're going to take a little break in case people are wanting to get up. Ladies and gentlemen, Judge Bud Watson.
Thank you. I bring you greetings from
John David Snodgrass. He ordinarily attends things of this nature and regretted greatly that he couldn't come. But he did call a judges meeting and called us into session before we came down here, those of us who were to participate tonight, and reminded us of the existence of the Judicial Inquiry Commission. He said a number of things in a very erudite way, eloquently, but I recall something about skinning a skunk and not getting the smell on you. But I did jot down a couple of things from a computer printout of Dea Thomas stories, and I want to share a couple of those things with you. I don't mean to imply now, and I don't think any of us mean to imply here, that Dea Thomas was around her in his younger days. As a matter of fact, Dea actually preferred a quiet evening at home with his wife and his babies, or going to church with them. Of course, no one ever knew it because old Dea never let on. He was no saint. But I expect that at some course during the evening, some of these insensitive clowns are going to get up here and mention something that comes up over and over when we start telling Dea Thomas stories, and that's the business. One little social blunder where he got out in the courthouse, and he did have a couple of drinks, and there was something about hurling the bottles down off the passers-by, and some maybe indiscreet language. It wasn't like he was in bad company. He was up there with John Tarver and Dave Worley. It just keeps coming up. It's 19 years ago. It keeps coming up again and again, as if it were the only event in Dee's life. And as a matter of fact, Dea screwed up a lot. I really worried about Dea back then because it bothered him so much. He's a very sensitive person. He's a fractious person, easily upset, and he agonized and anguished, and he was so upset about the publicity, and he was always mindful of his public image. And people at that time were calling him a prodigy. They were talking about his someday being governor. God. When the papers printed that stuff about the ledge and about drunks marching around the square in cadence and flower pots, I can't tell you about the flower pots, but I did understand that it was used solely for its intended purpose as a pot. He said he was only conducting his own field sobriety test. I think people that saw it said you handled yourself very well. But anyway, when they printed all that stuff, it incensed Dea highly. I worked for him. That business about drunk and disorderly, and I worked for him, and they had it on a Friday evening, and I came to work. I wasn't actually at work. I was sitting on a bar stool over at the Snow White. Dea was attracted to places like that. On a bar stool over at the Snow White restaurant, munching my toast, and Dea came in, and he was incensed about the whole thing. You could tell he was. They said I was drunk and disorderly. Those other guys were disorderly when I whipped their butts in line and got them marching. Well, we have to bring some of the younger of you up to speed about Dea. He was the DA here off and on for a while. In fact, he's one of the best DAs money could buy. And There was perhaps some contrast between him and the DA we have now. There were also some similarities. He was interested in child sexual abuse. I worked for Dee during one of his months in office. In fact, I worked for his successor. I worked for 4 DAs. I worked for Joe Berry as a DA, Aubrey Lamons as a DA, and for Fred Simpson as a DA. And I regretted that Fred Simpson and Dea Thomas just never could see eyebrow to eyebrow. Speaking of eyebrows, there really is nothing much to recommend getting old. Hair falls out of where you need it, out of your head and all your legs. My legs and knees down are bald as a baby. And it grows out where you don't need it, out your back. For transplants and clippers and greaser formula, Dea Thomas would look like a combination between a ball of Yogi Bear and Leonard Brezhnev. He's a good lawyer. Remember one time he was representing a young man on a DUI, and he'd copy him. And I said, this guy's got to go to the highway intoxication seminar. And he said, well, he'll go, Your Honor, but I don't think they can teach him anything. He's every time real random. Now, Bill Page says when you're sentencing someone, if his knee buckles to the right or to the left, you haven't really gotten good wood on him. It's when you lay north and south. I was sentencing one time in my courtroom, and his mama laid north and south in the gallery. And Dee, as respectful as he generally is, said, "You killed that lady, you old son of a bitch." Well, we're here to wish Dee a happy birthday. He's filthy years old. 50 years old. I can believe the years, but I can't believe the mileage. I believe his odometer's rolled over. I've never seen Dee down. Dee, if you ever do get down, I want you to realize that most of us in this room will never assemble this many people in our honor unless we croak. And then if we laugh, we ain't gonna laugh. That's from a man who's laid more north and south than anybody in the history. Let's take a 10-minute whiskey bathroom break.
The man with the video camera behind us.
Looks very good.
Congratulations.
Robert, I don't know if you realize that the Judge Younger is next. Ladies and gentlemen, Judge Tom Younger couldn't be here because of a previous commitment.
but I talked with him in his office and told him that we were having this. It drove him crazy that he couldn't be here. He asked if we could videotape it, and here's Robert Lane. By way of Marvel Television, Judge Tom Younger.
All right, David Dea Thomas, General Flip. I believe that Dee would be afraid to do that. He would be afraid that I put him on probation. First, let me say, ladies and gentlemen, that I regret not being able to be here in person. I have a meeting in Montgomery on Friday morning, and I must go down Thursday evening in order to be there on time. I'd also like to be here to enjoy the fun and fellowship with all of you. You're roasting Tim's 50th birthday. Hell, he's not 50. He's 90. But he's done more living in 20 years than you and I have in 50. Most of what I know about Dea Thomas cannot be repeated in mixed company. It wouldn't embarrass Dee, but it sure as hell might embarrass a lot of others. And it might even get some of them in trouble. Because I'm at a disadvantage. Can you imagine Dea Thomas being the only sober one in the room? Additionally, most of you know everything that I know about Dee, and most of it is public knowledge anyway. Everybody knows, for example, that he's a great wrestler. No one ever can attest to that skill. He's at his best, perhaps at bar parties, and of course he performed at JC functions for many years. Boy, didn't he look great in his suits, motorcycle helmet, with helmet to the rear and caution to the wind. Everybody knows that in the courtroom he'll whip your butt. In his first jury trial, as a prosecuting attorney, the death penalty was imposed. As a young politician, of course that's many, many years ago, he really had no equal. And except for the famous Ledge Party, he'd probably be governor today. Whatever he might accomplish during his lifetime, he will most remembered, or be most remembered for the famous Ledge Party. In Dee's early childhood, when he was about 5 years old, he came home one day crying uncontrollably, and his mother asked him, "What in the world is wrong?" Dee said, "My buddy took all my little kittens and put them in a sack and tied a string around it and dropped them in the creek. And they drowned, and I wanted to do it." On the grounds of immaturity. The judge asked you, I believe that was Judge Parsons at the time, several years ago, he asked him, said, "Well, Dee, just what way does she manifest those writings?" He said, "Judge, every time I take a bath, she comes into the bathroom And Judge Parsons said, well, Dave, that doesn't seem too unusual to me. In what other ways does she manifest immaturity? And they said, the last time she came in, she sank my boat. Some of you may not know, but Dea Thomas recently considered representing Mr. Strite in the current securities matter that's currently under investigation. When we went up to see him in the county jail, Mr. Strite started talking about the stock market, and he kept talking about the stock market, and they said, let's change the subject. Mr. Strite said, well, okay, what do you want to talk about? They said, let's talk about women. Mr. Strite said, common or preferred. Finally, I overheard Dea talking with one of his divorce clients the other day. His client said, Dea, you know, there's just not as much love in the world today as there used to be. And he said, oh yes, there is. Said, it's just another damn bunch doing it. Dea Thomas is a great sportsman, and he loves to hunt. One day recently, he walked into the woods and saw a pretty young lady, scantily clad. And he smiled, and she smiled back. And he smiled a little more, and she smiled again, and he said, are you game? Got it. Ladies and gentlemen, Dea, I never thought you'd live to be 90 years old.
Skipping down the program, the next speaker is Harvey Morris, as I referred to earlier. They've made a public service announcement just for Harvey's benefit. You may have heard it. It's mostly for female children. You've seen it come across the air. It says, it's 12 o'clock. Do you know where your children are? All mamas and daddies have been worried. Haven't heard for years. Ladies and gentlemen, Harvey Morris.
I understand I got roasted before I got here. And I asked Tommy, I said, why in the world would you want me to talk about Dea Thomas? He said, well, in talking to Dea, he said, if you want a few lawyers, he ever be as a DA. So I got to thinking about speaking of Dea Thomas and what it'd be like. And I thought about it as kind of like a baby. They're easy to conceive, but they're hard to deliver. Or really like a diaper. It's always on your ass and always full of crap. But seriously, Dea, when they asked me to do this, I thought the thing to do would be go back to, what is it, Monrovia? And try to talk to one or two of your elementary teachers and see what kind of student Dea was back in those days. So I went over there and I talked to Mrs. Mulberry or something like that and asked about Dea, and she said, well, you know, Dea was always known, and as I understand it now, is a smart ass and a know-it-all. And so she related to me an incident that occurred when Dea was in the 6th grade. And during that period of time, she asked the people in her class if they could tell her or give a good definition of Easter. And this little boy raised his hand, and he said, oh, so that's real easy. He said, you know, that's when the Pilgrims came over and ate on that rock and ate that turkey. And then they named the car after that rock. And the teacher looked at the little boy and said, son, sit down. This next little fellow raised his hand and said, well, teacher I know, said, it's when they commemorated the birth of Jesus. Said it's when they had those wise men coming in with those camels and giving those presents and things to to that little baby. She said, sir, she said, you sit down. So D raised his hand. And the teacher recognized D. So D said, you know, said Easter has to do with the crucifixion of Christ. It's when they nailed him to the cross and they wrapped a shroud around him and they placed him in a cave. About that time, Miss Mulberry said, listen, children, says, Mr. D. Thomas knows what he's talking about. Says, y'all listen up. And says, D, you go ahead and finish. And D said, they rolled a big stone across the cave, and after 3 days, the stone was rolled away. And said, if Jesus saw his shadow, there's going to be 6 more weeks. Believe it or not, Dee's reputation precedes him, even with young folks. And believe it, this is the cleanest thing I've got to say. But my boy knew D. We were down at the river together, and D had a boat at one time. And I asked my son, Bland, to make up a little poem. Bland's 13 or 14. And he made this to you, D, and it says, happy birthday. He says it is his birthday, D, I'm talking about. They say he's 50, but that I doubt. He acts so old to... He acts so young to be so old. He acts like a kid, that's what I'm told. He's got a big house and a fast motorcycle. He's got a Porsche and a fur coat. He drives his Porsche and motorcycle real fast. As for these fast things, that is of the past. He thinks he gets younger, but he does not. His looks and money is all he's got. That's my son. But the great thing about being able to say something about D is the experiences I've learned. Now, for example, in this particular case, it might be D on evidentiary evidence. We had a case one time that we were trying, and we presented, I was defending the case on self-defense, D was prosecuting the case, and I put a character witness up there to testify about the bloodthirstiness of the deceased. My client had killed in self-defense. He got up and I said, your name, age, how long have you known the individual? Do you know his reputation in the community for being bloodthirsty? And the witness said yes, as he was a bloodthirsty individual. I said, thank you. And D took over, and in law school you learn, D should have learned, to not ask the question that you don't know the answer. So D got up and he said, well, why do you say he's bloodthirsty? And the man looked over and said, well, Mr. Thomas, one day I heard this screaming and hollering. I ran over there, and he had this lady down and had a knife at her throat and said, well, cut your goddamn head off. Well, I learned then that I ought to look at D and maybe not learn the law, but learn how to do other things. Except one time, and Judge Younger, if he was here, he'll verify this happening. It couldn't happen to anybody but D. We were up there, and I'd always thought, and I was a young lawyer at the time, believe it or not, that D stood for fairness and justice. You know, you always hear lawyers saying fairness and justice. But I always thought he meant that, rather than the almighty dollar. But on one Monday, D went in, and he said, Judge Younger, he says, I've got a client, and we want to plead guilty today. So the judge went through all these rights and warnings and everything, and they pled him guilty. So we were up there the next day, and D always has a lot of criminal cases. He said, Judge Younger, he says, I want you to allow me to withdraw this plea based on newly discovered evidence. And you know how Judge Younger did. He looked down at him and said, D, what are you talking about newly discovered evidence? And D says, well, my client, I found out this morning, had an extra $1,000. But you know, Dee's up around age 50 now, and things are a little bit more hectic for him. And Linda told me this story, if she don't mind me repeating. But D has always been an individual who would brag about whether it's his victory in court, his conquest, of course, before he met you. And he was talking one day to Linda, and at age 50, I guess there's a lot of things that goes out on you. But Dee looked at Linda and said, Linda says, you know, as Dee was bragging about his sex life, says, you know, said, I've had a hectic day in court. And Linda looked up at him and said, well, what do you mean? He said, well, it's been such a tough day. He says, all I need is a shower, a drink, and a little strange piece of tape. And Linda looked up at him and said, well, what would you do with it? Take it home, let it watch you sleep? D.H. I want to ask you if any of this sounds familiar with you now. And I hear these may apply, and that is you don't care where Eclair goes as long as you don't have to go with it. You stop making excuses for sexual malfunction and realize you're tired. You've turned out lights for economic reasons instead of romantic ones. Now included in your sexual technique is strapping a blender to your hips and setting the control for grind. Dee, happy birthday.
Harvey reminded me of one story, and although I'm not a roaster, I'm going to share it with you. We were in Judge Younger's chambers one Friday afternoon, and Judge Younger has always set motion docket on Friday afternoon, and it's somewhere between a party and a roast and a legal session. Dude came in about 5 minutes late, and there was about 15 lawyers in Judge Younger's office, and Younger said, "I'm glad you can make it. Where you been?" He said, "Judge," he's sweating every sometimes. "Judge," he said, "I just had other things doing a little bit late." He said, "Well, I'm glad to see you." And he said, "Well, Judge, I'm glad to see you." He said, "Well, I see it, Judge. It's me and you against the rest of the son of a bitch." Ladies and gentlemen, Charlie King.
I really don't know why they asked me to speak. I never really liked it. I first became acquainted with him in law school. And at this particular time, of course I'm older than he is, I had spent 4 years in the Navy. I had survived the opium dens of Hong Kong, the flesh pots of Tijuana. I could get laid in 4 languages, cured in 3. And yet, I was ill prepared for any kind of association with Dea Thomas. I first met him at a fraternity party at the university while we were in law school. This is not my music.
It's Dee's.
It's probably yours too, Harvey. Anyway, Dee was pointed out to me across the room, and they're going to introduce me and said, "This is Dea Thomas." And back then, I tried to remember names. I don't try anymore. I don't really care. But I used a little mnemonic device. You know how you used to trick yourself into remembering names? And to me, he's always been Sandra D. You form an impression on someone, and he could have been handsome if it hadn't been for the Cro-Magnon brow. And that vacant stare, bordering on intelligence. After law school, God help me, I came to Huntsville as a deputy circuit solicitor. You know what that is, do you? That's what they used to call the district attorney, a circuit solicitor. And Tom Younger was the circuit solicitor, the DA. He was an assistant DA, and I was the other assistant. This was in 1962. And at that time, Huntsville was a cross between Mayberry and Spanish Harlem. Well, after listening to Jeff Smith's closing arguments on criminal cases, I believe that everybody in Huntsville carried a knife. And if you ask the wrong person or complain about the wrong person, they cut you. And I believe this. Tom Younger's arguments, I'm glad. Well, I kind of wish he was. But Tom Younger's DA used to close every argument with, and he's guilty just as sure as God made little green eyes. And I used to think, here's this guy getting strapped in an electric chair and killed in prison, maybe electrocuted, and he said, well, somebody, please just explain to me one more time about the little green eyes. Everybody whispered, he ought to be a circuit judge. Anyway, I came up to Huntsville. As I said, it's just like Mayberry. Hey, me. Hey, Opie. This was railroad these halcyon days. I was impressed with it. I said, this guy has class. This guy was wearing Brooks Brothers suits then. Everybody said, well, how can he do that on $8,000 a year? He wasn't wearing Brooks Brothers suits. Before Stanley Rogers discovered that Buster Brown shoes were keeping young adults. He had an aura about him. I think what we mistook for charisma later turned out to be vodka fumes with its own little rainbow. During those days, he would go down to Panama City and run amok. People didn't just lock up their dogs. They locked up their German Shepherds. This time I'm like,
like to point out the picture with Dee with the goat in the book. Oh, excuse me. She said, Greg knows what it is.
I just wouldn't know about that. But one time, Dee came back from one of his excursions down to Panama City. And, you know, back at this time, there were just the three of us in the DA's office, and we had a staff of one. We issued all the warrants, everything. And you didn't know whether you were going to try a case until they handed you the file to go in. And Dee came back from one of those trips to Panama City, and he had driven all that long. And he was going to come in to try a case, and I mean, he was just shot down something big. And I thought, well, I think I'm going to play a little trick on it. Because when, I know you don't remember. We had the file for him to go into the courtroom, start trying a murder case. And Dee says, what's this case about? And I thought, well, I was having fun with you. And I said, well, it's a murder case. I said, two pansies were fighting, and one killed the other. And he said, well, what were they fighting over? And I said, a purple tie. And he really wasn't with it. And he said, well, how did he kill him? I said, he squeezed him to death with his eyes. He said, can I hear that? So, we walked in the courtroom, and as luck would have it, there was a guy in the courtroom. He had on canary yellow slacks, a puce sport coat, polka dot tie, white buttons. You never saw anything like that. And this guy sitting over there. We walked in, and Dee says, is that the defendant? I said, no. I said, it's a new lawyer in town. I said, walk it up. I guess he wants to tie it. One more little story. You know, he got interested. Rick got very interested in golf. I heard this story on him. He has very good, you know, eyesight, distance vision, or eagle eye. And when you're playing golf, it's the problem keeping up with the ball. And I think he was playing with Dick Kemper. And Dick, of course, Dick doesn't see well nothing these days. And he asked, he says, keep up with the ball, you know, watch our shots. And they jumped in the golf cart and were going after the ball after they had teed off. And Dick said, well, where are the balls? And he said, I don't know where they are. He says, well, weren't you watching? He says, yeah, I watched them. He says, well, where did they go? And he said, I forgot. Big 5-0. What are you doing? You know, Dee's nice to friends. Sometimes he can be kind of hard on them, but he's nice to them. The other day, I passed Dee talking to Henry Mims in the lobby of the courthouse up there, and Dee was
trying to help Henry out, gave him a little tip. He said, "No, Henry, no. The 11th Circuit is not an interstate highway."
Thanks for bringing it.
If you've ever been out in the D and Claire's home out in the Principality of Monrovia, where they live, he has this huge pool table out there. It's big, oversized. And they have this little short pool cue. It's about half as long as a regular pool cue. And I asked Dee, I said, what is this for? And he said, that's Dick Kemper's. And I said, "Why, Dick, you can't play pool with this pool cue." And he said, "I know it." He says, "We just give him a few balls and let him play on the floor." He said, "Don't step on him, he'll bite you." Dee, congratulations on reaching 50. I hope one day to do that myself. And I really do like it.
By way of videotape, big man in a hurry, Buck Watson.
Really understand and get the right picture and the right attitude toward Dee, you have to remember two things. You have to understand and know two things. One is he's incomparable. He won't be defeated. He's undefeatable. And the other is that through all the years that I've known him, from 1957, 58, sometime whenever we were in law school together, I've never known him to do anything in his life that was malicious, or anything in his life that was calculated to hurt anybody or do anything bad or wrong to anybody. Everything I've ever known him to do has been either in the best interest of his client, the best interest of his friends, or to the contrary, totally irresponsible for the sake of fun. What a man. He never does anything irresponsible, maliciously, or with the intent to hurt anybody. I don't know if he's irresponsible now or not. He and I both got too old to do any of those things together anyway. And that's not an admission that I ever did anything with him irresponsible. Come back to me, through all of them, all of the things we did in law school and all the things we did when we first started practicing law. Two stories probably come back more than any of them. The greatest one was in the days when Dee was riding motorcycles and running the roads and raising hell and throwing wine bottles off the courthouse ledges and rumors. Getting put in jail and arrested and things of that nature. His wife was a good friend of mine. We called her She-Dee, Dolores. She's a fine woman. And they had some fine children. But I got to kind of clean this up because I don't want to hurt her feelings and I don't want to hurt Dee's feelings. But they had some troubles and some controversies that obviously would come from the way that he was doing. And some of the pictures that I've been shown of riding motorcycles and hauling baggage on those motorcycles that are not necessarily compatible with the marriage relationship. It's a talk. And one morning,
She, his wife, Dolores, I call her, came and walked in my office about 10 o'clock in the morning, dead of summertime. I was down on Franklin Street. And she said, I got to have some advice. She said, I want to know what you do. She said, he didn't come in last night. And I started riding around looking for him. And I ended up at a trailer at a certain place that I thought it might be, and this was in the Rat Pack days when he called himself the leader of the Rat Pack gang. And she said his motorcycle was parked there in front of the trailer, and the door was standing wide open. I walked in the trailer, and nobody was in the living room of the trailer. And I walked back in the back, and there was a bed back there, and there was Dee sound asleep, with obviously a friend or a close acquaintance. Nothing open but the sheets. She said there was a dead rat on the bedstead that was nailed into the wall, and it had been up there so long that it dried out. There was nothing up there but the skin and the bone. Charged over there and grabbed the sheet and jerked it back. Dean was finally the one having the clothes on, and Dean jumped up out of the bed, sleep, held up both hands and said, I know what you're thinking, I know what you're thinking. You're thinking I'm Dea Thomas. People just think for him all the time. As things went on, and Dee got cleaned up, got his life cleaned up, and quit drinking, and that brings up the second story. Where one of these fancy parties that our wives take us to about a year ago, and Dee quit drinking, and everybody was around the table, 2 or 3 doctors and some accountants, and I thought everybody in there was a whole lot smarter than I was, and I knew they were a whole lot smarter than me. They were talking about estate planning and taking care of money, and where they were putting their money at that time. Strip bonds were a big thing, and how they were putting their money in tax breaks and everything. And they looked at me and said, man, he said, I hate to die with money to buy. I said, what are you going to do about retire? But your family and things. He said, well, we're going to be terrible to die and have money in the bank. He said, I take care of all that with insurance. He said, I spend everything I got every day of my life. And we sat around there a while when the cocktail party started, and he quit drinking, and he looked at me after about 30 minutes and said, I got to get the hell out of here. He said, I feel like a spy. He's incomparable. He's been butchered up, beat up, legs broken, eyes gouged, amazing strap had some mornings, but you never know it. And I wish I could be there with you, but I can't be there with you, and I wouldn't necessarily want to be there with him, but I'd like to be with all of you, and I wish you the best of times.
Ladies and gentlemen, Judge Bill Page.
Stephen Roy Miller for last. I'm supposed to add a serious note to all this, Dee's 50 and all that. David Lawson Thomas is descended from William Maples, who at the age of 15 was a hero at the Battle of Guilford Courthouse in the Revolutionary War. His great-grandfather was Sheriff of Jackson County. That was the first Dea Thomas, Sheriff of Jackson County, Alabama, who died in office in 1900. And the line has petered out. I'm here talking about these damn good Lord, you don't know what the hell they talking about. The rumor is, if you want to hide something from Dea Thomas, you put it in a law book. I saw him one day coming over the courthouse with a stack of books. And I said, Dee, you know, you're not noted for your research. What are you doing with those books? And he said, this ain't for me, it's for them damn ignorant judges. He started practicing law with Doug Martin's daddy. Doug was back over in the corner. Doug's daddy cautioned Dee not to mess with Jim Baker, because Jim Baker had been divorced and was therefore a man not to be trusted. Dee tried the case, first case he ever tried, I guess. There was about 59. 58 or 59. And he was arguing, saying about 24 hogs had been stolen and massacred. And he talked to him, he said, can you imagine 24 pigs being stolen and massacred? That's twice as many pigs as on this jury. He had a very storied life in public office, and I will not recount that. It's been recounted. Everybody knows about it. Kids talk about it in school. But I will just say this about Dee's public life. I am grateful to the planning committee for putting this function on the first floor. These judges get up here and they think they can take public liberty with me. Linwood, that's as fast as he's reacted. Probably the most accurate. Of course, Bud Watson's up here doing God's work. Danny Banks, who some people say is my protege, he is not. I barely know the man. Danny Banks reminds me of the equine paradox, the great horse mystery. Why are there more horses' asses than there is horses? Of course, speaking, it reminds me of Adlai Stevenson, the one who's dead. Adlai Stevenson said, you can determine how big a man is by how big are the things that he hates. And Dee does not deal in triviality. He is a whole hog or none. It matters not to him if his client wants to plead or try. It doesn't make any difference. Take the money or try. Of course, E. Claire could have come in here tonight with a nice fur coat on if Dee had a little more sense. Stroll over his client. Of course, they mentioned earlier that Dee had a boat. Dee had a boat that never came back in under its own power. Joe Berry was up here, and Joe, of course, is a fine art. He's dressed in a dark suit, suitable for a funeral or a wedding. Joe Berry doesn't normally dress like that. I saw him the other day, and I remarked to him, Joe, I am finally glad they settled Pinky Lee's estate. Dee is 50. I talked to E. Claire the other day in preparation of this thing, and I said, is Dee really 50? And she said, everything about Dee is 50. One of the most important things you must remember, Dee, is if you're 50 years old and you go to the bathroom and it don't burn, you're lucky. Old Mella's going to tell you about his pugilistic experiences with Dee. You have to remember that at that time and at that moment, when that occurred, Charlie Hooper hit Alan Davidson in the mouth. He used that fight as a distraction. Bob Sherman ran off with a ham.
Pecker had to live, it had been 50 also.
When Page said that about the shipment running off the ham, Dick Rushby said, "That's true." This man needs an introduction, and Roy, I want to remind you, we're limited in time. We'd like to go to bed tonight. Roy Wesley Miller.
You know, I can't possibly expect to compete with people that don't work for a living. You know, I'll try to keep it real short because I know y'all got other things to do, but I came here in November of 1972. It was election year. Matter of fact, it was election day. I don't know who went out and who went in. But I came to the district attorney's office then, and there was a policy. There was a policy that you submitted an offer of settlement to the respective attorneys on the cases that they had, and they didn't take them within a certain period of time. You withdrew that agreement. So, in light of that, I had made several offers to Mr. Thomas here, my friend. And by the way, I had taken him as my star to hang my future on because I thought he was a most successful attorney. I hadn't read the papers before I come up here from Gaston. Dear Mr. Thomas, this was written to the firm of, I believe, let me see if I get it. It was Thomas and Worley at that time. Dear sir, this letter is to serve as notice that any agreement as to reducing said charge is hereby withdrawn. Inasmuch as said offer was made to try to expedite this case in the docket, sincerely, Roy Wesley Miller. I drafted that to D. He was a friend of mine at that time. D pondered over that and sent a responsive letter to that. He also referenced a copy to John Davis Snodgrass, who was the presiding judge then and has been for the last century. And still is. Honorable Roy Wesley Miller, this is regard to Willie Lee Davis. I don't know what the charge was at the time. Dear Mr. Miller, paragraph. Shock and disappointment overwhelmed me as I read your letter, wherein you withdrew your offer in the above referenced case. Paragraph. While clearly the docket may be of primary importance to you, there are others who are more concerned with ultimately concluding cases with a just result. I might paste this on to Judge Watson at the same time. You will someday, God willing, realize that some degree of inefficiency is necessary to have a just and decent society. I say this to you in an attempt to change your attitude in hopes of helping you to become someone we could always like and be proud of. Period. As what you do about this particular case, I really don't give a fuck. Attitude is so important in life. We all have attitudes. I personally respect Dee's attitude, and I love Dee, and I respect him as a friend, as a confidant, and as a professional, and that is what he is. Many times, when I think I'm about to be disbarred or whatever, I go see Dee. When I feel I'm overcharged, my client is about to turn me into the Essex Commission, I see Dee. Be that as it may, when I did come to Huntsville, I practiced in the district attorney's office for some number of years prosecuting. And subsequent to that, I have gone into private practice, and Dee, being the friend and the confidant and the professional that he is, has helped me build my
clientele. Those people I can name as my money clients: Claudia Rome, the whole damn Broadway family, all of the Congos, and last but not least, Jimmy Ray Wilcox. As I've said to you, and I won't keep you very long because Dee has taught me well in my profession, whatever that is. And I have modeled myself after him. Dee has taught me well. He has taught me to ride side saddle on a motorcycle at 110 miles an hour. He has taught me body slams and half Nelsons and full Nelsons and full gainers. Dee has taught me well how to shoot in boats, and by the way, they never got in on their own power. That is true. I will not go into the wrestling match that is reputed to have occurred between Dee and I. That's purely speculation and rumor. There is no truth to that. Shipman didn't run through the bushes with a hail. Charlie Rupper did. We did not make the social register. a rematch between Dee and whoever is in shape at the time. Now, in all seriousness, and I think we ought to end this on some sort of serious note, I have for years, during the period of time that I have been with Dee and known Dee, and been to some of the finer places in our area, including Tennessee, the Blue Spot, Rainies, those places. I have looked at him and studied him and tried to figure out what best personifies his attitude in life. And he has an attitude in life, and I love that attitude, and I respect that attitude. I always have. And I have, and hopefully, got it in my closing, recorded here to play for you. I do appreciate y'all coming out, because everybody that's here loves Dee, respects him as a professional, knows he's an excellent attorney, and as you'll hear this song, I believe you'll understand he's done it his damn way.